Back in January, I got permits for the Teton Crest Trail. It's a hike that has been on my list for quite some time, but because the permits are always released so early, I can never quite snag them. This year, I set a reminder on my phone calendar and was on recreation.gov at 8 a.m. sharp. I successfully secured permits, which I based loosely on someone else's itinerary I found in their blog and figured I'd nail down the rest of the details when the actual hike approached. I didn't even have anyone to go with yet, but I knew my backpacking network was vast enough at this point that I could probably find someone, or worst case, do it solo. A few months later, Chaunce agreed to come with me and the plan was set. She ended up being the perfect companion for this trip. Despite a somewhat rough start, the Teton Crest Trail ended up being worth every ounce of effort. Driving through the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, which I happen to be somewhat familiar with because of the CDT, the oil light on my car turned on. I figured I'll just get it changed in Rawlins even though I was early for a change. A little while after that, my car lost all power on the 80-mile-per-hour highway about 10 miles outside of town. We are currently coming at you from mile 224 in Rawlins, Wyoming, and just outside of Rawlins, I guess technically outside of St. Clair. Waiting on a tow truck. My car just decided to stop driving, and we're off to a start on the Teton Crest Trail trip.
We are having a time.
It went smoothly up till now. First 4 hours of the drive were fine.
We had a great 4 hours. We had a good run.
We had a good run.
It was good while it lasted. And now it's hot.
It's really hot. Of course we break down in the fucking Basin. Of all places.
Yeah.
I don't think I can stomach that. Chaunce kept me calm through the endeavor and the back and forth with AAA. We ended up eventually getting a tow to Rawlins, no thanks to AAA, to a shop right across the street from the very same bar where I procured the worst hangover I've had in years when I hiked the CDT in 2022. We made the best of the situation and stayed at a $90 motel, gotta love Wyoming, only for the shop to call me in the morning and inform me that I had simply run out of gas. I feel it's important to note that my fuel gauge had indicated that I still had a quarter of a tank. This is our Rawlins motel room that we stayed in instead of getting to the Grand Teton National Park last night. And current verdict is that my car ran out of gas.
Yikes.
And that means my fuel gauge was wrong, so I don't feel that stupid. But it did feel exactly like a car running out of gas, and they couldn't find anything else wrong with it. The oil light did come on, but I was looking in some Subaru forums, and they're saying that can happen between 3,000 to 3,500 miles after an oil change, and that's how long it's been since my last oil change. I don't need another yet because it's synthetic, but yeah. Just a very inconvenient case of running out of gas, I guess. Slightly embarrassing, even though my fuel gauge was wrong. I will stand by that. Regardless, I was relieved my engine hadn't been running without oil, which was my biggest fear. Essentially, the ordeal only ended up delaying us about a half day and just required some logistical tweaks to still get on trail the same day we had planned. We arrived at the backcountry office in Grand Teton National Park at about 4 p.m., and we were even able to adjust our permits to a more ideal itinerary. Because of our delay, we were going to miss the last aerial tram we had planned to take to the start of the trail from Jackson Hole. So we decided to start at a different trailhead, which added about 2,000 feet of climbing, but was still totally doable. We are officially, finally, trying to hitchhike and going to try and get to our starting trailhead so we can come back to the car. And it's like 6 p.m.
Nice. 6:01.
We've got 5 miles to hike. Should be fine. Should be fine.
Should be fine. Yes! Oh! South. Perfect. Thank you.
We successfully got a hitch from a nice family all the way to Granite Canyon Trailhead from where we left our car, and it's about 6:30, I would guess, and we are about to take off. We've got about 5 miles, and yeah, at least it's not super hot, but it is prime bear time, and we did see a bear driving this way from the car. It ran out in the road, and then climbed a tree. So that was interesting. It was brown, unsure on ID. After a quick encounter with a woman who seemed certain we were absolutely out of our minds for hiking into grizzly country, we were on our way. Our first camp zone allowed us to set up camp after only hiking a few miles, which worked out perfectly. We stopped for dinner a little while before camp so we wouldn't have to worry about food scent being near our tents.
What's for dinner?
Hydrated hummus and string cheese and cucumber on a tortilla. How are you?
Peanut butter and jelly Uncrustable.
Don't knock it till you try it.
I mean, I'll have a piece.
Do you wanna? Just gonna eat that part.
You just eat the butt?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna pack it out.
Wow.
Our campsite was nice and sheltered among the trees with the lovely Granite Creek running nearby. Bear cans. Ditched? Not really. Secured? Placed? Placed. In their appropriate spot within sight of camp. We finished an episode of the docuseries we had started in Rawlins and looked at the next few days of our itinerary before a surprisingly restful night of sleep for our first night in grizzly territory. In the morning, a moose cow and her calf walked down the trail right next to our camp. We followed their footprints for a good few miles of the climb, which felt like a good omen. We are climbing out of our first campsite in Granite Canyon. We saw 2 moose come by camp this morning, a mama and a baby, so that was fun. And we've got like 15-ish miles today with like a couple thousand feet of climbing, and I'm feeling my super heavy ginormous pack. That was a mistake. Found out after I got here that you could have Ursacks and not just bear cans, so having regrets about that decision, but it'll be good training for the Wind River High Route, so trying to just power through it. The day involved a good bit of elevation gain. We climbed up Granite Canyon and were swarmed by deer flies, horseflies, and mosquitoes. This was the worst aspect of the trip, and in my book, if bugs are the worst thing we deal with, it's a dang good trip. We are about 5 miles in, and I was ready for mosquitoes on this trail, but the flies out here are fucking awful. They bite, and they're swarming, and don't seem to be affected by bug spray. Ugh. Only 2.5 miles of climbing though, and then we're pretty much high up, it looks like, for the rest of the day until camp. As the trees got thinner, the views got better. So it goes. The flies did seem to follow us well above tree line though. We encountered our first few patches of snow on the way to Marion Lake, where we decided to stop for a nice break before our first pass. From the lake, the climb was short and gorgeous to Fox Creek Pass. From there, we traversed a wide open alpine area with views of the Tetons. We searched for a somewhat sheltered lunch spot and stopped for a good long rest. We have been having a nice little break here. A nice view. Basically done with our climbing for the day. And we ran into a former backpacker radio guest.
Yes, we did. Lieutenant Cuckoo Bird came up the hill and he asked for an ibuprofen. And I said, sure.
Yep.
And then we had a nice little break.
And he took some food off of you.
Yes, he ate one of my ham and cheese sandwiches. That was supposed to be lunch on Monday, and I really think we're going to be back.
I don't think we'll even be eating lunch on Monday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've been cursing that sandwich, and that was a gift. And then you tried to give him food, and he said, no, thank
He said
you.
no.
So I win.
He was doing the whole Teton Crest Trail in a day. The backcountry is kind of funny like that. So vast, it can easily swallow you up. But if you visited enough, you also might start running into people you know. From there, we began our traverse of Death Canyon Shelf, a very unique and cool section of this trail. The shelf featured dramatic cliffs to our left with a steep drop-off to our right. It reminded me of the Chinese Wall and the Bob Marshall Wilderness on the CDT, but it stood out in its own way. The unique topographical features paired with quite a bit of lingering snow made for stunning scenery. It was one of those places where everything is so perfect, you question reality. We saw marmots and stopped at a beautiful creek to filter water. We realized on this trail that water was so plentiful we stopped worrying about checking where the next source would be and just stopped whenever we were getting low. At the end of the shelf is Mount Meek Pass, which is the start of the Jedediah Smith Wilderness and the section of trail where you are outside of Grand Teton National Park. From Mount Meek Pass, you go down Sheep Steps, a beautiful set of switchbacks that drop you into Alaska Basin. We decided to stop for dinner at the bottom of Sheep Steps, thinking we would look for camp soon after. We felt a few drops of rain and contemplated moving our dinner, but decided to wait it out, and the clouds never really opened up. This is also where I went to pee behind a tree and accidentally scraped my butt on it when standing back up. So if you're looking for privacy, make sure you also check your clearance. We walked through Alaska Basin, which reminded me of areas in the Sierra on the PCT. Water was plentiful, and whatever wasn't rocky was green and lush. That little dip over there is where we came over the pass. And then down into the basin, and all the way over here. We had one final short but steep climb to our final destination for the day, Sunset Lake. It was indeed a perfect spot to watch the sunset. We'd made it a point to get to Sunset Lake the night before to set ourselves up for a more manageable day 3. We knew we had 2 significant passes. One had a potentially hazardous snow crossing, and we wanted to shorten the day a bit by hiking farther the day before. This meant our first pass on day 3 was Hurricane Pass, which was potentially my favorite of the entire trail. We are technically on day 3 of the Teton Crest Trail. Left camp about 20 minutes ago, about a mile into our day. Looks like it might storm today. We've got a 30% chance based on the weather where we were. I think we'll be fine going over our first pass, which is Hurricane Pass, but a little bit worried about going over Paintbrush Divide. It's also the section where they told us to bring ice axes and spikes for, so don't really want to feel rushed. So we're gonna have to keep an eye on the sky and probably make a game time decision. But if we have to wait it out, I think we'll have some time for that, hopefully. The initial ascent offered fantastic views of Alaska Basin and our campsite the night before. As we crested the wide open alpine area before the true pass, we got incredible views of Grand, Middle, and South Teton. Views like this almost feel like cheating sometimes. Like I somehow got in on this special secret by accident. I know I didn't, and that I worked hard to get here and all of that. But seriously, places like this exist, and I just get to go to them?
What mountain's that?
I think that's the Grand Teton.
That's it?
The one next to it is Middle, and then that's South.
Oh, very cool.
I definitely don't take that for granted. The real magic of Hurricane Pass is on the descent. To hikers' right is the magnificent Schoolroom Glacier and its impressive glacial lake. The moraine has formed a crater that almost looks man-made, but of course, prettier. With the Tetons towering over the basin, it's an impressive vista. If no other part of the hike had any views at all, every mile would be worth it for this one. But there are certainly plenty more.
Just stay in the center, it'll slide with you.
If there was ever a question about my speed on loose scree, I think this paints a pretty good picture. We descended parallel to the South Fork of Cascade Creek with rushing waterfalls the entire way. We even saw our third moose. Literally was about to turn around and say to you, "This looks moosey." The descent seemed to last forever, which always causes slight apprehension when you know you'll be regaining all of that elevation eventually. When we reached the fork with the Cascade Canyon Trail, we had a decision to make. This was a bailout point before our next high point and the potentially sketchy snow traverse. We had talked with the rangers and a few people along the way who all seemed to have potentially unfounded confidence in our abilities to navigate the section. We'd been checking the weather regularly, and that seemed to be holding out for us too. We had discussed our worst case scenario, trying to quickly cross the snow while fleeing a thunderstorm, and decided that if we bypassed it, that would be the reason why. At the fork, the bypass seemed unnecessary, and the plethora of day hikers reinforced our confidence. From there, we began our climb up the North Fork of the Cascade toward Lake Solitude. We saw more people in this section than we saw for the entire rest of the hike, by a lot. It seemed we were passing people every 5 minutes. The good thing about people in national parks is they are a great cue for wildlife. When we saw a bunch of people stopping at an otherwise uneventful spot, my wildlife senses started tingling. They were admiring a beautiful, mature bull moose, still in velvet. We stopped and watched him chomp on the willows for a bit before continuing our climb. It was almost 2 p.m., and we still hadn't stopped for lunch, so when we found a flat spot next to a creek, we had a full yard sale, and I felt back in touch with my hiker trash roots.
Show us what you got for lunch.
Chicken pho.
It is lunchtime, and we are, as Elise put it, having a yard sale. We've got all of our stuff. Due to the fact that we had to get our beer cans out to get our stuff out for lunch. And
I feel like what makes it fun is that for some reason this trail is really crowded.
yeah, we have somehow found like a really popular trail, and we didn't know that would happen, but we keep seeing people like every 30 seconds. So there must be a trailhead to the park somewhere close by.
We hadn't realized when we stopped how close we actually were to Solitude Lake, which would have definitely made an even better lunch spot, but that just gave us an excuse to stop twice.
Odds you jump in. All right. 3, 2, 1, 3. Guess I'm going in.
We enjoyed a good foot soak in the freezing water of the beautiful alpine lake before continuing our climb up to Paintbrush Divide. The gorgeous blue sky we experienced at Solitude Lake started to quickly disappear. As we climbed, the clouds continued to gather and get darker. Our worst case scenario was rapidly becoming the most likely.
I'm pretty proud. Going over that way. Looks pretty sketch, and where we're headed looks nice. So, grateful for that.
Although right above us still looked less gray than across the valley, it was getting darker and it started to drizzle.
It's starting to rain, and I did hear a little bit of thunder, but it's looking better on the other side of the divide. So just trying to power through and start going down.
Powering up the climb was the first time on the trip I started to feel a little winded. My 50K training has been serving me well. I kept an eye on Chaunce and eventually ended up getting out my rain jacket. Right at the beginning of the descent, we arrived at the traverse we'd been talking about the whole trip. It was very obvious. The backcountry ranger had mentioned he'd shoveled a trench in the snow, which I was very grateful for. It appeared to be at least a 75-degree angle, and there was absolutely nothing but rock that was just as steep below. I wondered why ice axes were recommended, because honestly, there didn't appear to be enough snow to self-rest on. To me, it looked like a total no-fall zone. The trench made the walk across very easy, just nerve-wracking. I was glad we were doing it later in the day when it wasn't pure ice. The scariest part, which we couldn't see from the other side, ended up being the roughly 8-foot slide off of the snowshoe and back to the trail. When I finished the traverse and realized that was the only way to get down, I was pretty nervous. I tried kicking in steps, but it wasn't really working, and I felt like I was risking a fall just trying to adjust myself to get down. I figured if I slid on my butt, chances are I'd have to land on the trail. The decision to slide was made much scarier by the reality that if I slid 1 foot to my right instead of straight down, I was free-falling into some gnarly-looking rocks. I did land on solid ground though, and was able to hold Chaunce's hand to make sure she did the same. I realized everyone we had talked to had ascended this bit, and I felt like that would have been much, much nicer. We felt grateful we had made it across safely, but didn't spend long celebrating because the gray clouds and rain were very much still a factor. We began descending as quickly as possible and crossed a few less consequential snowfields. Once we were back among some trees, we relaxed for a bit and even saw what we have dubbed a chocolate marmot.
Oh, look at him splooting.
They are much darker than the yellow-bellied marmots in Colorado, and they are very, very cute. We ate dinner in some trees before continuing our descent to Holly Lake and our final camp. Getting to the actual site was a bit confusing because at first it looks like the trail just terminated at the lake. In reality, it curved around, and we made it to the nice sights that we ended up having all to ourselves. We spent some time deciding which site would be most protected from the wind before setting up just in time to beat more rain. We hung out in our tents for the evening as it rained with varying intensity. Unfortunately, I was rolling around in my sleeping bag last night, and the clip, this little clip that fastens my quilt to these ropes so that I don't get a draft, poked a pretty significant hole in my sleeping pad. You can see the flap right there. That like just immediately deflated. Like, it was not a slow leak. It was a pop and a fast deflate. Luckily, I had my foam pad with me, so I was still able to insulate from the ground and sleep somewhat comfortably. So I noticed these little white baggies on all the trees, and I was super confused, thought it was weird. So I went to investigate, and it is pine beetle repellent. Verbenone pouch. So definitely don't eat that. But also I've never seen that before. That's so interesting. But I'm glad it exists. Oh my gosh, you can see remnants of a bunch of staples. They've done that a bunch of times. Super interesting. We packed up and began the hike out with much better weather than the night before. We had 6 miles of exclusively downhill hiking with light packs, which always makes for a good morning. We followed Paintbrush Canyon Creek out of Paintbrush Canyon and began to see more and more people. We eventually reached String Lake, where it became very clear we were close to popular trailheads. We made it back to the car and decided to immediately get to the closest fountain soda. We ended up having lunch in Jackson and searching for cowboy boots, but were ultimately unsuccessful. Our drive out was luckily uneventful besides a lovely stop in the town of Lander, Wyoming, another CDT town I have fond memories of. Mile for mile, the Teton Crest is one of the best shorter hikes I've done. It's got incredible views around every corner, wildlife, and just enough challenge to keep things interesting. I have a feeling I'll be back to explore even more in the Tetons. I kind of want you to look at it because it's so painful and afraid of.
Show me your butt bruise. Wow.
Oh my god.
It looks like bug bites.
I can actually see it.
Yeah, it looks like someone scratched your butt.
Well, I did run into that tree.
Wow. I don't see the bruise anymore though.
You don't? I feel like I see it right here.
Maybe it's because I'm wearing sunglasses. So that's Elise's butt bruise. You want to tell them how you got it?
A combination method from, I'm assuming, my barricade in my pack on the first day, not packed 100% properly, is how the bruise got there. And then I was peeing behind a tree and I stood up too fast and racked my butt into the tree.
She backed that ass up.
And that's how I got the scratches.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Elise has found the wildest animal out here. She's about to climb it. Giddy up. How's it feel?
It feels like getting on a horse.
Really? Yeah, now what? Look at you from all angles. If she was riding off into the sunset, she'd look like this from behind. Majestic.